I will remember 25 years ago, where once that final day, the final whistle went, within an hour, the football club almost shut down for the best part of 2 months, didn't it? Whereas now it's just a living, breathing organism that works 365, 24/7.
Like, you need to think about that in January, because, for example, if you're going to release it, there may well be somebody that will pay some money for that player in January.
There is actually some work that we have to do in preparation for the close season, isn't it? Around silly little things like releasing players, trying to sign some new ones, preparing for the pre-season trip that has to be booked months in ahead nowadays.
There is sometimes that element of when you look out to the pool on that, when you're having your welcome drinks or whatever, and you look out to the pool and you can see 2 footballers and a manager sat around the pool already, and you're just thinking, oh my God.
No.
Welcome, football fans, to Breaking Lines, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of the beautiful game like never before. I'm Gary Rowett, former player and manager, joined by the insightful Dave Carolan, a man with his finger on the pulse of football's beating heart. Together, Dave and I bring you unrivaled insight, context, and a few stories from the trenches. Join us as we dissect the game, break down the plays, and explore the intricate dance between managers, players, fans, and the beautiful game itself. This is Breaking Lines, where the game is more than just a match.
Well, the close season is upon us. The season has been bookended. Nearly all of the competitions have finished. Obviously, the FA Cup is always the outlier, isn't it? It's always at the end of the season. Champions League final still to come. But for most of the normal people in football, the close season is here. And it's normally welcomed, isn't it? But after a long, grueling 10.5 months slogging.
Yeah, you usually, slogging. You've gone for slogging, Dave. It depends on where we were at that current time. We've had to come up right the season. I think that, you get to this stage anyway, you've had a lot of preparation, a lot of time in the club, a lot of time working on problems and issues and things you need to improve and what have you. So, there's always that feeling of, particularly if you know where you are coming up to that last game, there's that feeling of, I'm looking forward to a little bit of a break. And so, of course, when that last game happens, usually you have a few things, don't you? So, like, maybe you're in the next day for a Player of the Year awards, or maybe you're in the next day to try and get the players to have one last chat with the players so that you can give out programs, or you can chat to 1 or 2 players that have maybe been released or play. And you might have done that in the week leading up to it, but often if there's something still on the last game, you would perhaps leave that. So yeah, you get to that point, don't you, where just a little bit of a breather, spend a bit of time with your family, go away on holiday, because of course we have to cram all our holidays in usually, don't we? Between somewhere around the 7th or 8th of May to the sort of end of June, we've got to try and get a year's worth of holidays into that period, which is a challenge, isn't it? So
100%. But that's part of the run up to the end of the season, is they try to organise where you're going to go. But you touched on it there, that a lot of work is happening while you're finishing the season, and you could be fighting battles on different fronts, couldn't you? You could be preparing for the playoffs, or challenges at the other end of the table, or whatever, which mean you're not exactly sure of when the season is going to end, per se. It could be that you're trying to plan a holiday that you might have to stick in the bin.
Well, that's the other interesting part. I've had to do that a lot, because at some point you have to book something, right? You have to at least say, okay, we're going to go somewhere, or we're going to try to go somewhere. And there's been I booked a holiday recently. This is slightly different, but I booked a holiday recently, and then my wife was going to Spain with the kids, and obviously I was going as well. And that was the whole proviso. I don't want to go on my own, but if we're all going to go together, then that's great. It's a little bit more remote. It wasn't easy. Probably needed someone to drive around. So obviously I was the designated driver. And we went and spoiled it by getting a job, didn't we? So all of a sudden I've got family, and the weather wasn't very good either. So that I wasn't the most popular person in the household. But they're the challenges, aren't they, of trying to have a bit of normality. So when you get to the end of the season, I mean, part of it, like you say, is what are we still in? What's still available? So if you're still in the playoffs, when do you book a holiday? You know, I booked it before where, you know, you wouldn't be around for the final, but knowing that almost as a bit of a motivation, I've done it before where I thought, you know what, I'd be so happy to rearrange this holiday if I'm in the final. So it's almost like it's a win-win both ways, you know, because you've got something to look forward to. You've got the sort of earlier, you know, the sort of semi-final to get through. And if you don't get through to the semi-final, you're away on holiday, and you know, that's a bit of a commiseration sort of present, if you like. But you might well have to cancel it. And you don't know, do you? So that could tell you, when's the playoff final? Playoff final's end of May. I mean, I've had that, you know, on a number of occasions, being in the playoffs, getting to the final, and having to shelve all your plans. So, yeah. But again, most people don't realise, do they? But we have actually got lives outside of football, haven't we? Believe it or not. And you know, at times, just like a normal person would, where, you know, or not a normal person, someone in a different industry would be able to book a week, and they're guaranteed that week's they're going. You know, they book a week off work. Really, really simple. And they've maybe got 4 or 5 opportunities to do that. And you know, you're going. Whereas we're kind of always on tender hooks, aren't we? We're always maybe hoping, or, you know, hoping it doesn't, or it does derail those plans. You know, because that's the industry we're in.
Yeah, I think we'll come back to our holiday things in a second, but there is actually some work that we have to do in preparation for the close season, isn't there? You know, around silly little things like releasing players, trying to sign some new ones, preparing for the preseason trip that has to be booked months in ahead nowadays. So actually the close season, in a funny way, is started maybe with a third of the season still to go. A lot of preparation has to go in, doesn't it? A lot of meetings are happening around recruitment, which players are going to be retained, which ones are going to be released. And we're in the middle of that now with clubs at the end of the season doing their retained released lists, which are being published. We've already probably for about 3 or 4 months had a pre-season camp booked. We're trying to organise games as well. So I suppose it's, we get to the close season knowing that the process for that has already been going on for kind of 3 months. How does it work in terms of those kind of preparing for this squad handover? Let's start with release of or retention of players. How far ahead would you start having a meeting with the recruitment team and maybe sporting directors and so on around who's been retained, who's been released?
Yeah, I think in truth, good planning starts, and it's the same for the pre-season stuff, you know, starts probably just before the January window. Because, you know, not only have you got, you know, when it comes to a training camp, you got lots of other teams trying to book similar training camps, so you need to get in early. When it comes to games, you need to organise. You know, it takes a long time to get those games booked and confirmed, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? So that starts early, and it's the same with releasing players, because you have to have an eye. You know, for me, you can't just get to April and go, okay, who are we going to release now? You know, because like you need to think about it in January. Because, for example, if you're going to release a player, you know, there may well be somebody that will pay some money for that player in January. So you have to have that mindset of, okay, well, if we can at least think about it now, what, you know, we can make some good plans between sort of now and the end of the season. And obviously that's the last opportunity to do it in January. You've also got the flip side to it where, let's say a player is going to start to ask that question in February, March time, and you or the club or whoever's making or whoever's telling that player, you know, often you can get the club to start to speak to the agent and start to maybe shape the expectation. But I would always try and do that myself. But if you're trying to be fair and do it in February, March, then you can't then expect that player sometimes not to be a little demotivated when they get the news they're not going to be here any time past the end of the season. In fairness to players, they are incredibly professional. There's some players that will just go to the last game and be no different, have no less commitment. They want to finish their season strong, and they want to leave their legacy with a team, depending on how long they've been there. But also, you have to have half an eye on that. So if you're going to release a couple of players in maybe the same position, then do you need to replace that already in January? So I think those conversations and good planning need to be had as early as that. And then, like you say, there's lots of conversations that go, look, if you're an agent, or if you're the player and you're getting nowhere, you're not getting the answer, you're getting the sort of vague answers all the time. Oh, look, we're going to wait until the end of the season before we decide. And then, of course, there's always that player that you want to re-sign. So, of course, as soon as that player re-signs, all the other players know, well, clearly they're not sure about us then. At best case, they might wait a little bit longer, then re-sign. As worst case, and most probable cases, they're waiting till the end of the season, and that's why they're not having that same conversation with us. So I think there's so many things that go into that. And often some players won't come and see you. Some players will just come and see you directly. Look, what's happening? And some managers. This is the great thing about sporting directors now. You can say, well, look, it's not my remit. It's not what I do. So you're gonna have to go and see a sporting director, and hopefully it'll give you the answer you want. So no, but there's different ways of doing it. I'm being facetious, of course.
Yeah, not next door. Yeah, go and see that guy. Yeah.
Yes, this is me being you.
Yeah,
I would have played you.
That's the chain of command.
It's all changed. So yeah, those conversations around player retention, and sometimes, of course, you can have an incredibly good player, but a club has an age model where, they don't want to extend contracts beyond the age of, say, 30. And that can lead to quite a lot of, I can remember at Millwall having discussions around a player that I felt we needed to give an extra year to. And the club, and I can remember the club weren't so keen, whether that was sporting director, owner, chief executive, whatever. And you could understand that because of the age of the player. But of course, when you're the manager, you see the nuances of the squad. You see how that player plays his part into the team dynamic and the squad dynamic. And I suppose there's, look at someone like Hutchie's just, I think, been released, hasn't he now? Been a top player for that club, top player for the team, but of course had a few injuries sort of, the last few seasons has made it difficult to get on the pitch as much as you'd want him to. So of course you have to make that decision at some point, and it's always a tough decision if a player's done a lot for the club and been a big part of the team. But those decisions are always difficult anyway, because you now, rather than just one opinion, you've now got 3 or 4 opinions. So it can be quite challenging. And of course, you can have the flip side where you want to sign the player. We had it with someone like a Jed at Millwall, where you want to sign the player and he wants his contract to run out so that he's got options. I'm not saying it was as simple as that in that case. Maybe had he done it early, he'd have re-signed. But the club chose to wait 6 months to renegotiate. And then, of course, at that point, the player thinks, well, I'm a good player. I've played really, really well in the championship for a team that's near the top. I've contributed massively. So why don't I just wait and see what happens? And that should rightly work both ways. It can't just work for the club's benefit. I use Jed as an example, but there's lots of good examples of players who've done that and gone on to get really good moves for them, both playing wise and financially. And that's an opportunity for players. So there's so many different things that go into those decisions at the end of the season. I think the challenge a bit sometimes is you can't tell everybody all these things. And of course, this is why we're doing this now, because, you can't tell everybody why a player is not signing at that moment. You have to be quite vague. you have to sort of say, well, we're still in negotiations. We're still hopeful a deal will be done. At that point, the club want to do it probably more than the player.
Yes.
So there's so many factors. But yeah, it's an interesting point, because before you even get to the summer, there's a lot of work goes into those preceding months.
So that happens with the players. It's another time of change as well. Behind the scenes, there can be staff leaving. It's the natural end to a cycle where staff, whether they're medical performance analysis, coaching, or whatever, we also see a lot of movement in those guys. So not only can you be in a situation where you're trying to replace players, but you're also having to recruit new staff for a lot of these roles. And previously, that would have been a kind of another thing put on the manager's table. Go and find a new head physio because your current one is leaving. Maybe that's when you also see a dynamic change in the background staff as well. It's another flux of closed season that we see, which is staff move, and you're sometimes having to find and interview and put in place new staff in those roles.
Yeah, and that's a huge challenge, isn't it? Because you've got young members of staff who've done really well, but perhaps are not rewarded in the same way because, I don't know, Premier League clubs coming for them, and they could be part of that process. So they're leaving. You've got an older one that maybe wants to get closer back to home, and they're leaving. And I think part of the challenge with that actually is, well, you've got different reasons. I mean, we had it with Callum, that he had an opportunity to manage back up in Scotland, near where he lived. And that was an opportunity you couldn't stop him taking. So there's different reasons why people leave. I think sometimes the challenge with staff leaving it's bizarre really, because clubs have a slightly different mindset. I think, if a player's leaving and you need to replace that player, of course, more often than not, they're happy to get that deal done straight away if they can. Whereas a member of staff sometimes, there's always seems to be that, well, we don't want to do that just now because then we're paying them over the summer to do nothing. And of course, the manager, you just want your team in place so you know where you are. But we've had that number of times at different clubs, haven't we, where you're promising a job and you're having to say to that person, look, we can't offer you it till, say, the 1st of July. Now, maybe that person's got to give notice in the job he's in, so that works. But other times that can actually mean that you're waiting to get some of that work done. You're waiting, if he's still working at his club, because he doesn't want to just leave, and then all of a sudden you can't do the work you want. So there's always challenges, isn't there, within that dynamic. And some summers you find are bigger than others, can't you? You have some summers where maybe there's a turnover of the squad of 8 or 9 players, and then there's a turnover of 3 or 4 staff for different reasons. And that could be a real challenge to your culture as well, can't it? Maybe not getting the right people in, maybe having to go with someone you've never worked with before, and hoping. And some of the best people we've worked with have been those cases where we haven't worked with them before and they've come in and been brilliant additions, or other people that, you've worked with before, but maybe are a different part of their journey. So lots of different challenges. But yeah, so I think what we're learning very quickly here, aren't we, is that the summer for someone involved in professional football, particularly for us, manager, head of performance, head of health and performance, head of medical, we're both having to collaborate on so many of those issues over the summer, aren't we?
Yeah, when it comes to certain things that happen within the summer, which is you've got new signings who are kind of come in, they need to have medicals done, they need to have all of the background checks done. But we've also got that other cohort of players as well, which are, unfortunately, you sometimes have injured players, and the care for them doesn't stop on the end of the season, does it? They have to have continuity in care and in support. So it's not like the whole training ground shuts down like it used to. It's like you've got medical staff, performance staff in the whole summer now, essentially supporting the players, whether they're injured or they're looking for additional work. That's a big change, isn't it? Because you and I will remember 25 years ago where once that final day, the final whistle went, within an hour, the football club almost shut down for the best part of 2 months, didn't it? Whereas now it's just a living, breathing organism that works 365, 24/7.
Good point, actually, Dave. Sometimes as a manager in particular, you can work remotely doing the same sort of things, to planning, talking to players, all of those things, signing players, speak to agents. So you can do a lot of those things remotely, but actually there's so many people still working over the summer, isn't there? And you've got the groundsmen that, having to plan, ripping certain pitches up, like probably with about 4 or 5 weeks to go of the season, and having to work out that cycle of, well, I can keep one pitch available for you. Is that okay? And then we'll start to rotate. And then when you come back pre-season, unfortunately, we haven't found a way to necessarily make grass grow much quicker, have we? So, well, there are one or two, I suppose. Well, this is actually your
fault. Some of the times we found people who couldn't make grass grow. Never mind quicker.
Very good point. But yeah, so you come back sometimes, there might be 1 or 2 pitches available, but not the other couple, So there's all those challenges. But I think the biggest one, like you say, usually the sort of, the girls in the offices that are having to sort out all the stuff, or having to still sort out some of the player issues, having to sort out the logistical side of things. They're still working. But the medical team, like you say, that's probably the biggest one where actually if you look for some of those people, they've got 2 or 3 long-termers. I'm sure they can still rotate a holiday or 2. Oh, God, blimey, bored talking about medical. I'm bored talking about medical already. I'm sorry.
Only 20 minutes in.
You talk about people that over the summer, like you say, they're in most of the days. They can rotate a little bit between their team, but still, there's a lot that goes on over the summer. And of course, as soon as pre-season starts, in some ways, you're expecting them to plough through a 9-month season, 10-month season, just like everyone else. Or actually, for them, it's very much a 12-month season, isn't it? Because they don't get that time off in the same way. I mean, some of those guys do incredible work, don't they? I mean, give us a flavour of that. What would it entail for like an injured player over the summer? Let's say, God forbid, in April, a player does his cruise ship, and all of a sudden he might be out for, I don't know, what's that now, 7, 8, 9 months.
Yeah.
Some of those early months are absolutely vital. So what would they, not necessarily for that specific injury, but what would a week look like for an injured player?
Yeah, I think currently, in modern times, you've got medical and performance staff and teams which are a lot bigger than they used to be. So exactly what you say there, they'll have a rota, they'll have people cycled on, week off, or you might end up doing 2 weeks over the summer. If it's 7 or 8 weeks, you'll cover 2 weeks, which gives you another 5 weeks essentially, which is time off. And going by most people's contract, that's still the kind of same amount of time that most normal people would have off. However, for the injured player, it's ensuring that they're getting the right amount of work at the right time, but also realizing it can be a really lonely place at the same time. So we try and schedule their work around also giving them a chance to have a break as well, because again, as you're saying it there, it's like that injured player is then going to come back into a full season. So they may have just done a full season, then be in all summer, then go into another full season where they're trying to get back and fit if it's a long-term injury. So you realize it's actually almost 2 years non-stop training and challenges for that player, and similar for the staff, because it's not like the staff can pick up an extra week's holiday in the middle of January or something. We're in the middle of a league season. So yeah, it is certainly really challenging, and then it's about good scheduling, I think, most of the time. So even if you're in a small department, it might mean that you'll just super compress your work into 3 or 4 days so that you can have long weekends and the player can have time off as well. But it's certainly become more difficult with the expectation of players that the club will cover absolutely everything 24/7. That's an expectation. And maybe it's because, again, we've spoken about it on other episodes where foreign players have almost nailed that expectation down into the English game, whereas before it would have been, look, it's end of season, you have 2 weeks off, just go and get some sun on your back, and then we'll see you for a couple of weeks, and then we'll all have another couple of weeks off. You don't have that anymore. The cost in some ways of running a squad means that if you've got a player on X thousands of pounds a week, then the people upstairs are expecting that player to be back as soon as possible, because they want that money available on the pitch. They want that player available on the pitch. So yeah, it certainly affects the injured players, and it certainly affects those looking after the injured players. Meanwhile, all the coaching staff are swanning off to whatever islands in Greece that they want to go to.
Hey, listen, we have seen some innovation amongst the medical staff at certain clubs, haven't we, where the players, I don't know whether it's a player that suggested this. I think it's probably the medical staff who suggested it. Said, look, if you want to go on holiday, then why don't you just take me along with you? And, I'll just do my own thing most of the day, but actually, I can treat you and I can, we can do a little bit of work at one of these training camps. There has been known that a player has paid for one of staff to go away with them so they can actually do it abroad rather than do it in the sunshine rather than on these shores. So yeah, good.
I think there's good touring by all parties to get that over the line. You just got to pick the right player that might bring you to the right type of location.
Not skipping accommodation.
No. If they're able to do that, and if it's within their means to be able to do that, then it's a win-win for everyone, isn't it? Because the player gets a break, the member of staff in some ways gets a break. It's certainly a lot cheaper than booking your own holiday. And you get the work done. They get a medical care. What does? Let's take you've got away for a week, but you're in the middle of negotiations. So, how does that week look like as a head coach? I mean, are you having to field calls left, right, and centre from agents, from players, from sporting directors, from your own staff? Like, is there a time? Do you manage to compartmentalize any time, which is just I'm not contactable, or are you just available 24/7?
I think, unfortunately, in management, you are available 24/7. I think it changes with the levels. If I'm being honest, I think when I was at Burton in League Two, all of that, you sourced the player, you contacted the player, his agent, you did the negotiations, and then you squared it off with the owner, and that was essentially how it worked. So I can remember numerous holidays where really unfair. In some ways, it's a side that people don't see. Really unfair on your family and really unfair on your wife and kids, because everyone should have a holiday, shouldn't they, where they can at least focus on being together as a family and enjoying some quality time. And I can remember walking around swimming pools for hours on end trying to sign a player, like literally for hours on end. I mean, my wife in the early days used to call the holiday by the player I was trying to sign. I'd be the Dave Carolan tour or whatever it would be, because that was essentially...
Must have been a good one, that one.
For the whole holiday, that didn't take long, that negotiation. Key to the point, it was really easy. But that's what happened. So, you would be trying to sign a player from the first day on holiday. Let's say you were away for 3 or 4 days, a little sick break. And by the last day, you could have spent more or less half of that time trying to sign the player. And the player could turn you down on the last day. And there's a horrible feeling of just wasted 3 days. And probably going to get it in the neck when I get home. And essentially, I haven't got a player to even show for it. So I think as you get older, I think and more experienced, you start to learn to try and utilise those times a little bit more sensibly. So, occasionally I would say, look, I'll go and get a coffees this morning. I'd have a little 20-minute stroll to Starbucks or wherever the cafe was to bring the takeaway coffees, knowing that I could probably make a phone call on the way and on the way back. So
a tactical coffee then, yeah.
coffee, yeah. Like you just had a coffee. What you talking about? Yeah, but I really want to. I love coffee. And I just love coffee. If coffee sponsors would like to come on board with this podcast, then feel free. And it's got to be a certain quality.
I do like Pret coffee.
There you go. No Pret coffee. Not for subscription anymore, are we?
Yeah.
Well, there would be so many holidays where you'd want to give everything your full appreciation, full attention. You know, your kids when they're younger, your family, your wife, but the reality is you're trying to get deals done, and they have a massive impact on your season. And they have a massive impact on your ability to be successful. So you have to put the time in. And like I said, when you're young, you're hungry, you're up and coming, you're all of those things, you know, that's all you can see. All you can see is the next deal, the next player, the strengthening of your team. You know, so I've had some really interesting ones on holiday. I don't know. I think we spoke about this before. When do you do the negotiations? Do you do them late in the evening when you've had a few sherbets, or do you do them early in the morning when you may be at least sober? And I've had a few where I've sent an agent a text that I had meant for the head of, or the director of football, or head of recruitment, that was quite disparaging about that said agent. I've accidentally sent it to the agent. And that horrible moment where you're sat by a sunbed and you go, oh no. And I've had to literally ring that person straight back up and say, look, I'm sorry. That was meant for X. I sent it to you. It was about you. I can only apologize. So, and I've also had conversations with players where, you know, the agent said, look, you need to ring him and have a chat with him. And I've had some great chats with players, and I've had some other chats where I thought, oh, this is really difficult. Like 5 minutes into the conversation, I'm thinking, literally giving me nothing in the conversation. And it's one of those really awkward conversations. In fact, you know,
is that because he's on an all-inclusive as well? So you both not communicating.
Well, you know, he could have something far more exciting to go back to. You know, his jet ski may be waiting while he takes a call. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Or something else for that matter. So I think that's a challenge. The challenges are always, you know, that balance between doing what you need to do for your job, just the basics of it, doing what you need to do to try and make sure you do that job really, really well, i.e. get that player that you really want, that you think is going to make the team better.
Yeah.
But then I think as you get a little bit older, you learn to be a little bit more selective in the calls you take. As you get a little bit older, you learn to delegate a little bit better. And of course, different levels have people in place to do that, you know. So if you're working at a championship level and you've got a director football, which I know a lot of levels have got that now, but certainly we didn't have in League Two. But in the championship, you know, a lot of that work can be done before it lands on your doorstep. And you maybe just have to ring the player and have a conversation, you know. And of course, the video conferencing now is a lot easier because, you know, it's like this, isn't it? You're still close. You can see each other having a conversation. You can pick up mannerisms. You can pick up certain cues that you think the player's giving you that gives you a little insight into the character. But yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, using it probably wouldn't be a good one. So yeah, all of those things, but certainly a week's holiday isn't a normal week's holiday. I haven't had one holiday in the last 15 years of doing this job where something hasn't impinged on that quality of time with your family, and that just now becomes the norm, I think.
Yeah, so a quick one on that. So there's two things. So we'll roll them into one. Have you ever had to leave a holiday to go and meet a player? And what does that meeting the player in the closed season look like? Like, you're going into a training ground, are you meeting them at some remote location? You know, obviously we're not talking about anything uncouth here where, you know, you're speaking to a player that you shouldn't be speaking to, but it's like you're trying to entice a player in. Have you ever had to fly back from a holiday and start meet them in London to go and show them the training ground and show them the stadium to try and get over the line. Is that an expectation that the clubs might have if that needs to happen?
I think it would be an expectation. I don't think I've ever done that personally. I think I've met a player in a location that I was in, and the player happened to be somewhere not too far away. And I've certainly done that with members of staff as well before. So that's just a fortunate situation that you're in, that makes it easy. But I think that would be difficult. I think, look, if you desperately needed to sign that player, of course you'd fly there and you take that meeting. But, again, you're trying to be fair to the people that are important to you as well. And you're trying to have that holiday, aren't you? But a normal meeting would consist of, and just to answer a little caveat to that before I answer the question, when you said about, you're obviously for legal reasons trying to say that you'd never meet a player, but every manager, every club, every level, at some point will have a conversation with a player that they probably shouldn't have. Do you know what I mean? I think that's an easy thing to answer. Not
a whole different episode of that, and we're going to have to seek legal advice just before that one goes to air.
All the homes clubs do.
Yeah, of course it is.
Look, so I think that's just. I think that's no one wants to say it. But I think let's get it out there. That does happen.
Yeah.
I think everyone accepts that does happen as well. So that's the difference. Those meetings take place in different ways. So, sometimes you'll meet halfway between where you are and where that player is. I've met literally at service stations. I've met in rooms in hotels, not actually bedrooms. In the
meeting rooms, yeah.
Although I have met a club once in a bench, they'd taken a bed out, but it was still a bedroom, and it was really weird meeting, I've got to say. So
Martha. Yeah.
So he didn't get that job, or wasn't offered. But player meetings could come in all sorts of different guises. I think they once were just a meet up for a chat with the player. Then it became meet up with a chat with a player and the agent. Sometimes it might be meet up with a chat with a player, the agent, and maybe the dad, sometimes, or the mum. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it would be meet up with the player, the agent, then start presenting something to them on a TV, and then it's so I think everything just evolves, doesn't it? Where everyone's trying to go one step further. I've sat in some presentations where, they're showing the club, they're showing the plans for the club, they're showing the players' clips, they're showing the data and how that fits into signing the player. And sometimes as a manager sat there go, wow, we're really going over the top here. But maybe as a player, you go, wow, this club really wants me. Look at the work that it's done. So I think a lot of good people, a lot of directors of football head to recruitment. There's some brilliant work gets done on some of those meetings to really make that player feel important and be able to understand how they'll be part of that team. I've done that before, and still the player hasn't signed. Because essentially you can do that. If someone offers a player 50% more money or a league above, realistically, no matter how good your presentation, they're probably taking that opportunity, aren't they? Because it is a career, it is a business, and players will still think about a lot of those elements like they should. So those player meetings are quite different. I mean, it's interesting because I've seen some over the years where a player's having a meeting with an agent, and as a manager, sometimes you think, okay, where can I have that meeting? So I've met players in Canary Wharf out in the open in a restaurant. For example, you're sat outside, and maybe because it's London, you think, well, no one will see us. But I've also seen photos of these meetings for other people, and you're thinking, what are you thinking there? You're meeting in a hotel, and everybody can see, and all you need is a fan to take a picture and put that picture on social media, and that player could well be contracted to another team, and that's where, like we said, you would then start getting into a little bit of problems and a little bit of trouble. So there's lots of different stories, isn't there? There's lots of different examples of players doing that, and
hence why do it internationally while you're on holiday, because there's going to be less people that are potentially going to be around you. Let's mix business and pleasure by making sure that there's one kind of central location that everyone can go to. Which brings me to a kind of another part, like, what's it like if you end up in a hotel with other football people? Because we've heard about it all the time where people end up booking whatever the resort would be, whatever the hotel would be, and they look across the pool and there's another coach, a manager, a player, and you're just like trying to get away from all these people, and now they're right in front of me again.
Yeah, it's interesting as well because, a lot of the times as a manager and as a player, a lot of the hotel suggestions would come from, I don't know, maybe your wife, and she's seen it on social media site or thought, I'd really love to go there. So of course, one person's idea of a dream holiday usually becomes another 5 or 6 people involved in football, because it's like anything, isn't it? But, there's money in football. People like to stay in nice hotels, so you get the same sort of clientele. And I've been, for example, I think, when was it? I think it was last summer. Might be last summer or the summer before. I stayed in a hotel that I stayed in Mykonos. And it's a brilliant hotel. And I literally woke up one morning, walked out to the pool, and Ollie Watkins was sat on a sunbed, and it was quite a small hotel with his partner. And you get chatting. Of course, it's one of those things, isn't it? You don't want to hassle people. You don't want people to feel like they got to talk about football. But but there's a respect there, and you have a chat. So I had a great chat with him. Lovely couple, really, really down to earth guy, and
didn't bring a napkin and get him to sign it, and then fill in all the details about his transfer later.
No, I don't think we could afford him at the time. So, and then you might go absolutely and you walk past each other in the street again, and so there's lots of examples I can think of where I've been to, I don't know, Orlando when my kids were younger, and you see loads of footballers. Been to Dubai, loads of footballers. And I think that's...
Marbella used to be the one, wasn't it? Everyone would be in Marbella.
Valdelobo, all these places where, lots of players at the time used to go to similar places, and you would guarantee you would see them. Personally now, if I go on holiday, I try to find somewhere where I think there's probably not going to be lots of people in the industry, because it's like anything, isn't it? There's a respect there, and there's a friendship there with a lot of people, but there's still a little bit of, I'd like to go somewhere and just, have a normal week without having to talk shop and talk football with people or feel like you have to. So yeah, I think that's the norm, isn't it? I think, but you do turn up at a lot of these places, and there is sometimes that element of when you look out to the pool on that, when you're having your welcome drinks or whatever, and you look out to the pool and you can see 2 footballers and a manager sat around the pool already, and you're just thinking, oh my God.
Yeah.
But it be said that I've also made lots of good friends on those holidays where you've got something in common. You actually perhaps don't know them that well, and you start chatting and actually think, God, what a great guy. What a really nice family.
Yeah.
And, so you get both sides of it, really, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, like all good things, eventually the holiday comes to an end, and then it's not at that point that we start planning for pre-season, because in modern days, we've probably been planning for pre-season and had a schedule and almost had every drill written down like for weeks on end. It's certainly what we've done in the past, hasn't we? We've had a pretty detailed kind of outlook of what pre-season is going to like each day. But at some stage, it's then you kind of go through that curve, don't you? Coming out of the season, relaxing, forget about it a fair bit, to then, right, now I've got to start focusing. It's a couple of weeks out from the start of pre-season, and you're starting to look at the game schedule, the training schedule, and ensuring everything's in place.
Yeah, there's so many things that go into that, isn't there? I mean, we spent so much time together, haven't we, trying to plan a lot of these bits and other members of staff, So if I think about it, well, one thing we've always tried to do is maybe try and get a lot of the bulk of planning done before the season ends. You often those last couple of weeks take care of themselves, don't they? Particularly if you're not playing for anything. So we'll try and get a lot of that planning done so we know what that looks like. But then there's always still those little bits of nailing down, that final sort of calendar of events and how that week's going to work. Of course, at that point, often you might not know where you're going pre-season. Someone like yourself, Dave, might have had to go out and do a visit at the resort to make sure everything's in place. You might have had to do a couple of visits to make sure the pitch is good enough quality. Of course, you go 2 months out, it's not going to be the same as closer to pre-season. And so are some of those logistical challenges that go with pre-season. But yes, so many things that come into it. I think one thing we've always tried to do is try to have a very detailed sort of plan of what we're doing and what we want to get out of pre-season, how pre-season looks. And I think you use that as a base, don't you? Use it as a basis. You might change the odd day. Let's say if we've had a really hard day and it's getting harder than perhaps we've even thought, and the players are starting to say, we're a bit sore and we're a little bit, then you've always got to be able to adjust, haven't you, within that pre-season time frame. But certainly those couple of weeks before you go back, I mean, that's when you probably start to go from, I really want a nice break and I really want to be able to decompartmentalize a little bit and start to think about, switching off a tiny bit to then switching back on again. And it doesn't take much to get that, does it? Maybe a couple of weeks in, like you say, you're now starting to think, okay, my holiday's going pretty quick. I haven't got long left. And that seems to about 7 weeks, 6 or 7 weeks seems to fly by, doesn't it? Like before you know it, you're a week to go. And also starting to think about, okay, what does a squad look like? Are we happy with it? Sometimes you have that, come on, we need to make a couple of signings because we want the group to be working together from day one, not day 30 of pre-season. Like often, maybe chief exec is not in a rush because they perhaps don't see as much value in getting your team in the building on day one. And obviously a lot of those things are out of those people's hands as well. So, so much work goes in, but of course, and it might take you a day or two sometimes. I don't know how you felt. I've always felt going back in, like the first day always feels a bit weird. Always feels like you haven't done the job for 6 months. Do you know what I mean? It feels like you've been out of it for a while. And then day 2 or day 3, it feels like you've never been away. So it's always a strange one. How do you feel about that first sort of day back pre-season? Because you have
for us, it's hell on earth, isn't it? It's like literally the busiest day of the year. It's we've got to line up all of the medicals, all of the performance testing. Everything has to run smoothly. And obviously the manager, the head coach or whoever, it's a different day, it's a lot of pressing flesh and seeing everybody and having chats, whereas we're trying to herd cats around the building, because we need certain players and certain points at certain times to be able to get the program to run. And it's really funny how over the years, like almost that first day, which might have taken weeks and weeks of planning to get the organization, and if there's a carousel of testing happening, you're trying to plan it so it's as smooth as possible, how that can almost set the tone for pre-season and even further. Because if it goes really well and everybody's come back in good fettle, like I'll always jokingly put out my social media bingo about the interviews that happened at the start of pre-season where everybody's come back in really good shape, and we're going to get the balls out, as you said earlier, on day one. However, if day one with the testing doesn't go well, it just starts to feel like, we've been at one club where we've done fitness testing early and we've gone, oh my God, like we've got so much more work to do here than we thought. And we're very quickly taking that plan that we had already written down and gone, right, we need to change this. We need to do more. We need to do different. So for us, I've always found it's the most pressurized day of the year. And certainly in my earlier career, when you're responsible for everything because you didn't have a team of people, you had to have everybody in, weighed, skin folds, fitness testing, outside, strength training, strength testing, all of those had to be boxed off in one day. And then from day 2, it's handed over to the coaching staff, who are like, great, it's been 6 weeks since we've done some coaching. Let's just go hell for leather. And we don't get, I don't think, that first day of kind of relaxing into it and pressing the flesh. Just watching you guys talking to them all the time and disrupting our sessions.
It's interesting. Listen, you can't have it your way all the time. Do you know what I mean? It's like you're trying.
Well, even one day would be nice.
Why not? But I think it's funny actually to say that. I've never really thought about it in that sense. I suppose when you think about particularly those first couple of days, that is probably, like you say, that's probably the most pressured situation for the performance team, the medical team, actually, because so much needs doing in there. And players aren't always as compliant as you want them to be. Either are you on things like that, So you've got a really good group, and I'm sure that would make it a lot easier, but it doesn't always work like that, does it? So yeah, have you ever had, I mean, I'm probably putting you on the spot now, but have you ever had a first day that's not gone as well as you hoped? Or things?
Oh, yeah.
Like the bleep. So teams got stuck in your box all over. Do you know what I mean? And not played properly for the bleep test.
Yes, we've all had that situation where you've got a stereo system or whatever it is, and then it runs out of battery. And then, you're having to drive a car up onto the side of the pitch, opening all the doors so that all the speakers could be heard. And I've got a picture of my first day at Birmingham where I think I had more staff watching the tests being done than players who were doing the tests, and we had pretty much a full squad, because it's one of those days, isn't it? Like the first fitness test of the season, it's like everybody from the club comes down to see who's going to fall out of the test first, in some of the tests that we used to do. But yeah, I've had it once where, unfortunately, with technology, with testing systems. So I was doing lactate testing, which involves taking blood samples. I've got 2 people on alternate treadmills. I'm on my own. I've got 24 players to test across the day, and I've literally got about 5-minute wriggle room between each test. And then something happened to the machine after like the 3rd batch of tests, 6 players in. And it was panic stations. It took me half an hour to fix it. But then the whole day's gone off and everybody thinks it's a shambles, but it just happens, So,
yeah. Have anyone been sick?
Yeah, we've had people getting sick, but, I like to call that, that's them pushing themselves to their limit. The problem is their limit was so low, it was nowhere near what our expectations were. So it was like,
embarrassing on this thing.
No, but I think the embarrassment goes on because for the rest of their career, everybody just reminds them about the time that they threw up after doing like a basic 5-minute, 6-minute run. But there we are. That's the joy of it. Anyway, that's us back to start of preseason. So it's a perfect way to end the discussion on close season. I suppose a little quick last couple of minutes. It's probably the only time we also get to do some additional learning, isn't it? So qualifications. You see a lot of people who are at clubs off doing courses in the summer, don't they? So they're not all just sat on sunbeds, are they?
No. I mean, there's different parts of that. So I think my first 4 years of being a coach, I had 2 weeks, more or less 2 weeks away every summer to try and get qualified, to try and be as qualified as you could be. Then I had a little break, and then I had 18 months of qualification. So a lot of people do that, and that takes a big chunk of it. You've also got the international players. I had a mate of mine that was a youth international and got into the seniors. He was under 21s. He was senior team, and he played till he was about 35. And I think there was one scenario where he said to me he had 9 summers in a row where he had a tournament. So you think about that. We talked about staff earlier, but there's scenarios where players don't get any sort of a break. Now, of course, might be a bit more lenient when they come back. But mentally, that's quite difficult to do as well. Privileged position, but difficult to do that. So there's so many different scenarios in there about why your summer might be taken up. And you're right in what you say. That's a crucial time to actually get on some of these courses and be qualified, because you haven't got time in the season.
No, it's literally the one time, certainly in our industry, there's a lot of conferences that happen after the end of the season, because it's a time when people don't normally have to sacrifice being at the training ground or giving up, again, that precious family time that happens during the season, where, every minute counts when your kids are not at school, isn't it? And you can be there with them. But yeah, I suppose close season, it's got its challenges, but I know one thing for sure, that first day of pre-season, we're already getting ready to book the next close season holidays.
That bad. That day must be harder than I thought it looked. You must have made it look easy then.
That's a skill, isn't it? Anyway, good discussion on close season. So maybe we'll get ready for the pre-season one, which won't be too far away.
Here's that.
Right, I'm off to book me sunbed now. See you later.
Yeah, take it easy.